Hello and welcome to this year's State of the Service Roadshow for Victoria. My name is Lucy Poole and I'll be your MC and facilitator for today's event. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're broadcasting from today, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional custodians on whose country you are participating, and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who have joined us today. We've got a cracking lineup for you today and a lot to get through in just an hour. Today's session will commence with a keynote address from the Australian Public Service Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Pat Hetherington. This will be followed by a short video and then a panel discussion where you can ask questions of our speakers here today. Mary Cavar and Ali Doyle will join Pat on the panel to answer your questions. I'll tell you a little bit more about Mary and Ali in just a bit. But first, a little housekeeping just to get us started. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the APSC website. If you have any questions or issues, please send us a message via the GovTeams chat box. And the chat box is also where you can send your questions through the panel session. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the Australian Public Service Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Pat Hetherington. Pat commenced in the role of First Assistant Commissioner on the 24th of August 2020 and began acting in the role of Deputy Australian Public Service Commissioner on the 1st of May 2021. Prior to joining the Australian Public Service Commission, he spent almost 20 years in the Department of Defence, where his last role was as First Assistant Secretary, People, Policy and Culture. His responsibilities included enterprise cultural reform, Indigenous affairs, graduate programs, learning and development, workplace relations, and Australian Public Service and Australian Defence Force, employment policy and conditions of service. Pat's move to the Commission follows a secondment to Services Australia, where he was involved in mobilising the Australian Public Service in response to COVID-19. Over to you, Pat, for the Commissioner's address.
Thank you, Lucy, for your introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we meet on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues joining us today. Today, I welcome our Victorian colleagues to our State of the Service Roadshow. This is an opportunity to reflect on 2021 and to discuss where we are heading into the future. I very much look forward to the question and answer session. It's been a tough year for many Australians, on top of a tough year before that. As there are more than 26,000 APS employees in Victoria, I'm certain everyone listening today has been impacted in one way or another. As we continue to deal with the impacts of the pandemic and other recent events across the country, the challenges that have been thrown at the APS over the past year have been significant. And in my view, your ability to continue to perform and deliver for the Australian community during these extraordinary times is admirable. The APS has a vast range of responsibilities. There are more than 153,000 people in the APS working across 97 agencies and 14 portfolios in more than 567 locations across Australia and the globe. I think the most recent figures are actually in excess of 157,000 now. Your work matters. Through persuasive policy advice to government, through regulation and through service delivery, you touch the lives of every Australian. The latest State of the Service report paints a picture of a service that is fully engaged and committed to the task of supporting and delivering for our fellow Australians now and into the future. I suspect it's not going to get easier. The demands on good governance, on statecraft, and on our capacity to work as a cohesive public service will continue to grow, as will the public's expectation of government. The world around us is fast evolving, with our attention dominated by crises over the last 2 years, both at home and abroad. For the APS, this has meant making rapid changes under increasing pressure as the needs of citizens and governments shift dramatically. The pandemic continues to illustrate the increasing complexity of our work. A public health crisis with implications for our economy, our regulatory system, national security, and how we deliver services, integrate technology and data, and mobilise our workforce. This pandemic will pass, but the challenges around geopolitical and societal volatility, technological change, and economic disruption will not. To continue to effectively serve the government and the Australian people, we will need a public service that is driven by data and the sophisticated utilisation of technology. We will need an APS that is collaborative and works as one enterprise in dealing with increasingly complex and interconnected issues. To effectively serve the modern Australian community, diversity in the APS of ability, culture, gender and age reflective of our Australian community is key, along with an inclusive culture to leverage the breadth of perspectives and expertise that reside in each and every team across our wonderful organisation. And fundamentally, we need an APS that is committed to its values, to service, it's ethical, respectful, accountable and impartial. So where are we heading? Public service reform is a never-ending journey. Much of it is about cultural change, and that takes both time and coordinated leadership approach. But it is also about how we attract, retain and develop our people capability. To make sure that our employee value proposition is strong and that we stay competitive in the war for talent. The independent review into the APS by David Thodey proposed wide-scale changes to ensure the APS was fit for the future. The report focused on the need for a more joined-up, people-facing, data-enabled, capable and trusted public service, able to deliver effectively in a radically new operating context. The government agreed with the majority of the independent panel's 40 recommendations and asked our most senior leadership group, the Secretaries Board, to take these forward. And it's done that. The Secretaries Board has used the pandemic to accelerate implementation of practical reforms that make a real difference. The public service 10 years from now will look very different from the public service of today. So what does this mean for your work? Clearly, it requires a very major focus on our people and our capability. It is now 1 year since we launched the APS Workforce Strategy out of the Australian Public Service Commission. The strategy is the foundation for driving the alignment of APS initiatives and investment to attract the best, develop the capability of the APS employees and mobilise people to our highest priorities. Implementation of the strategy is supported by the APSC's Centre of Excellence for APS Workforce Planning Capability. This small team is having a high impact in its support across APS agencies, fostering workforce transformation across the enterprise as a whole, whilst meeting the unique circumstances of agencies. System-level thinking and ensuring the enduring capability of our people is at the heart of APS reform. Last year, we established the APS Academy. It is a hub of learning for employees at all stages of their career, with a focus on the core craft capabilities that are critical for a world-class public service such as ours. Under each of these capabilities is an array of learning and development opportunities available to every APS employee, irrespective of location and stage of your career. By way of example, these range from foundational training in topics such as integrity or delivering policy, professional development in topics such as human-centred design or engaging stakeholders, through to delivery of SES masterclasses that recognise the unique operating environment of the APS. An APS Academy faculty made up of respected current and recent APS senior practitioners guide the design and delivery of programs on offer. It is part of a deliberate new approach to learning and development that leverages strengths and the areas of expertise across the APS and seeks to embed a culture of continuous learning. One example is an EL2 professional development program currently under development. We're seeking to offer a flexible pathway for participants to choose learning components that emphasise particular areas of capability development aligned to APS-wide needs. For example, managing hybrid teams or developing leadership capabilities. We're looking to start rolling out the program later this year, so you'll be hearing more about it in the coming months. An APS learning board made up of APS and external experts has also been established to look at new ways to build capability across our 150,000 plus strong workforce, to best support our people to develop the skills and expertise they need to deliver for the Australian people and the communities that we serve. One of its early priorities has been to reduce duplication and inefficiencies in L&D purchasing practices across the APS. A new learning marketplace is being explored, aimed at increasing competition and innovation in the market and also ensuring that we get the biggest capability uplift for the dollars that we spend. And to ensure that we can make the best use of our expertise and resources in a fast-moving and interconnected world, we have also undertaken a review of the APS hierarchy and classification systems. The review looks at ways to make sure we better value and utilise the expertise and contribution from people at all levels, roles, functions and locations across Australia. It addresses how modern and flexible ways of working can support more effective decision making, remove bureaucratic barriers and promote greater mobility and responsiveness. The pandemic accelerated this need, with the APS demonstrating through COVID-19 how empowered teams, reduced hierarchy and a oneAPS mindset supported timely, data-driven decisions by government and mobilised effort to support the priority needs of our community. Structural change occurs rarely in the APS. In its 120 plus year history, the classification system we have today is a result of only two major reforms, a shake-up in the 80s and then a move to the current APS and executive level structures we have today in around 1998. Nearly a quarter of a century on and in a vastly different operating environment, it's not just timely, but essential to ask whether our existing culture and structure inhibits our capacity for innovation, agility and delivery in today's world, and for our leaders to demonstrate the willingness for bold change. Digital and ICT transformation will play a significant part in a fit for the future APS. A digital review has provided a baseline of APS digital and ICT capabilities, and we have a sharp focus now on a whole of APS approach to digital funding. Supported by the DTA, the APS is working together to ensure we are investing in the right things at the right time and moving in a strategic and coordinated way. One aspect of this is the sharing and reusing of digital capabilities to help optimise our investments across government. If one agency invests in a new technology, new pattern or skill, we want the rest of the APS to be able to easily leverage this. The digital government strategy sees government using advanced technology to meet the needs and expectations of the public, offering stable, secure and reliable services. This digital service vision is already being tested every day, supporting record numbers of people seeking COVID-related support and more recently, flood-related support. And while there's plenty of room for improvement, we are meeting this demand in ways that we could not have imagined 5 or 10 years ago. Technology alone, however, will only take us so far. The new Australian data strategy supports stronger decision making through making better use of our data, and it's critical that we continue to grow the necessary skills to make the best use of these transformative technologies and this valuable data that we hold as a service. These actions work hand in hand with the APS Academy, and we have invested in growing data and digital capability directly through the APS professions. The digital and data professions have grown over the last 12 months, with more than 3,000 of you signing up and accessing training, career development opportunities, and communities of practice. If you haven't signed up yet, I strongly encourage you to do so, and you can do so through the APSC's website. We've also had record numbers of applicants and participants coming through our data and digital entry-level programs. Ultimately, however, improved APS capability is about delivering tangible benefits for the community that we serve. We need to be vigilant and remain grounded in our approach to what needs to change and what remains of enduring value. A fit for the future APS requires us to manage the increasing complexity and interconnectedness of issues and the expectations of government and the Australian people. And we have to look ahead at a shifting horizon. Our reform ambitions need to keep moving with the changing landscape and also with the changing nature of the work and the workplace, often dubbed the future of work. First, We are living through a fundamental transformation in the nature of the work that we do and the skills we need for a high-performing APS. Digital technology pervades the work environment everywhere. To be a leading digital economy and take advantages of changes in machine learning, advances in artificial intelligence and digitisation, the APS needs to scale its digital infrastructure and skill its workforce. 71% of agencies have said they have critical shortages, with data, digital and ICT being the most frequently reported. To illustrate, Australia is estimated to need approximately 156,000 more digital technology workers by 2025, against a backdrop of global digital shortages, skill shortages. In reality, we are in a fiercely competitive labour market for talent, and we need to get better at keeping up with the rapidly changing skills requirements of our workforce. We are making progress to building strong capability pipelines for data and digital careers in the APS, with initiatives like Career Pathfinder. At the same time, we need to develop data and digital literacy across our whole workforce. Second, we need to reimagine where we work, learning from the at-scale working from home experience and accessing new talent pools across the country to bring skills into our public service. We need to retain expertise and develop capabilities within our existing workforce, but that alone cannot provide all of the solutions. We also need to bring in expertise to reinforce our capability. Our capacity to attract those we need may require a substantial shift in our perceptions of where work can be done. Hybrid work, splitting time between both home and office, is not a new concept and will almost certainly be a feature of a contemporary Australian public service. Whilst many of you are doing this already, leaders across the APS will need to be well equipped at leading and managing dispersed teams. The use of flexible working arrangements in the APS, including working from home, predates the COVID-19 pandemic and will be a mainstay for the APS to be seen as an employer of choice. However, we must continue to strike the right balance between flexible work arrangements and delivering on behalf of government and the Australian people. For example, many of us are employed in frontline roles or secure IT environments where the notion of flexible work may look very different. Skill shortages in the broader Australian labour market and strong competition for specialist talent and expertise increasingly requires flexible and innovative ways in which we will attract and retain staff. For example, most of the digital and data roles are advertised within Canberra, but we know more than 90% of the talent with digital and data skills are located outside of the ACT. Decisions about flexibility and where we work can remove the geographic boundaries of recruitment. Many of you in Victoria will have observed this for yourselves. This also presents an opportunity for the APS by bringing us closer to the communities we serve, helping to improve service design and delivery. Crucially, however, in a competitive war on talent, it enables us to tap into labour markets right across Australia. Third, the experience through the pandemic has shown that flexibility is possible in the APS, and new ways of working can empower staff and deliver positive outcomes. One of the successes of this period has been the ability of the APS to work together with new opportunities for collaboration between agencies. Public servants have also been deployed across the APS at pace and scale, a pace and scale that has never been seen before. One example is the APS Surge Reserve. More than 4,500 people were deployed over the last 2 years from across the APS to surge into priority areas of work. As we speak, approximately 500 people are deployed to Services Australia from around 23 APS agencies, assisting to process disaster payments to Australians as a result of the devastating floods in New South Wales and Queensland, which is an ongoing crisis. This collaboration and enterprise-wide approach means skills, knowledge and capacities can be drawn across organisational boundaries to better meet the urgent needs of Australians. The need for collaboration across traditional agency lines will continue. We will need to ensure that our culture and structures are well suited to this way of operating. Today, 50% of employees in the APS are digital natives from Gen Y and Gen Z, who expect their roles to reflect technological advances and new ways of working. Building on a strong platform of continuous reform and to prepare for the future of work, a new Future of Work Secretaries Board subcommittee and cross-agency task force has been established to develop practical and evidence-based actions to ensure we attract, develop and retain the capabilities and talent we need. I want to finish up by talking about the relationship between the public service and ministers and their officers. It's timely to do so given that we are fast approaching a federal election. Irrespective of the outcome, it will signal a renewed agenda from the government of the day. Our caretaker conventions guide our approach once an election is called and we enter the caretaker period. Each of us should already be thinking about how the caretaker conventions will apply to our work. How the APS manages transitions in election context is one of the ways we act with impartiality and demonstrate our wider stewardship. One of the great strengths of Australian democracy is the way we manage transition between governments or ensure continuity and renewal for a returned government. This, of course, is underpinned by the preparation of incoming government briefs, the red and blue books as they are known, provided to the party voted into power by the Australian people. The smooth management of transition is fundamental for the safety and prosperity of Australia and Australians. But more than that, a strong partnership between the APS, ministers and their staff is at the core of our Westminster system, and it operates at its best when characterised by mutual trust, respect and confidence. Not every member of the APS will have direct contact with ministers and their staff, but it is important every member of the APS is aware of our respective roles. Working with a ministerial liaison reference panel and a set of guides have been published to support the APS to establish strong partnerships. They cover working with ministers, the role of departmental liaison officers, the operating environment of ministerial officers, and ministerial transitions. Within the APS Academy, the panel has also assisted to develop and deliver a new Strengthening Partnerships SES learning program, and we're now building on that work to develop a complementary program for parliamentarians and their staff to ensure they get the best from the APS. In conclusion, there will always be natural and global forces at work that will throw up complex challenges for us as a service to manage, and the clarity around the forms they will actually take is undetermined. In the words of the great modern American poet Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Our service will require fine-tuned statecraft and everybody in the APS working at its best to meet the challenges of the future. If we are to effectively serve the Australian people and the government, we will need to work in partnership as one APS to harness the diverse perspectives and knowledge our organisation can bring. The Australian Public Service is world-class because of the sense of service that you all embody and the values that guide our work. Thank you for the work you do, and I wish you well in 2022. Back to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Pat. An insightful and highly relevant address, so thank you so much. A reminder that for everyone else that Pat will be joining the panel in just a bit for the discussion, so he'll be there to answer your questions. One of the themes that Pat just touched on was oneAPS and how we're all working towards the same goal. At the end of last year, a video was created to showcase just how diverse the APS is. We would like to show you this now.
Hi, I'm Kanchi from Newcastle.
Hi, I'm Mark from Hobart.
I'm Yana from Canberra, which is Ngunnawal country.
I'm Simon from Brisbane.
I'm Kay and I work in Geelong, Victoria.
My name is Mirage and I'm based in sunny Nauru.
I'm Zara, based in Fitzroy Crossing, over 3,800 kilometres away from Canberra.
What oneAPS means to me is working towards something bigger than yourself.
Engaging, collaborating and sharing knowledge.
No barriers between agencies.
We already have a good history of coming together to solve complex problems.
Bringing all of that diversity that people bring with their backgrounds.
Through teamwork and collaboration.
This is oneAPS in action.
We provide face-to-face service support to our most vulnerable, remote, disadvantaged and Indigenous customers.
I've helped customers with bushfire claims, with flood claims, even cyclone claims.
Helping Australians from culturally and linguistically diverse background.
Bettering the lives of the Australian community. Like this little guy.
I want to have one APS that can demonstrate people with disabilities into leadership positions.
It's just been great to be part of oneAPS where we all work together
towards a common goal as oneAPS.
oneAPS.
Okay, so we now move on to our panel discussion. A reminder that if you've got a question for the panel, please send it through the question and answer tab on GovTeams. If you see a question and you also want to hear the answer, you can like it to help vote it to the top. So as I mentioned earlier, we have Mary Cavar and Ali Doyle joining Pat for our panel discussion. Mary is the Executive Manager Melbourne at the Productivity Commission, where she is responsible for planning and coordinating the Commission's inquiry and research work, supporting the development of staff, and also advising on analytical matters. Ali is the Assistant Commissioner Culture and Inclusion at the Australian Tax Office. Ali has led significant cultural and business transformation, both in her current role and in her prior position of Assistant Secretary Learning Branch at the Department of Defence, where she oversaw the conception, design and implementation of the Defence APS Online Academy, which now sees 1.5 million visits per year. Thank you for joining us today. So my first question is for Mary. You lead a team that looks at research opportunities. How do you think research will play a part of the future of the APS?
Thank you, Lucy, and welcome from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. So in terms of research, the APS has a wealth of administrative data, and that wealth is growing. So these are the data that are created as we deliver services, collect revenue, regulate businesses and individuals. And those admin data are a huge untapped gold mine. They can be used to undertake policy and program evaluation and improve the value proposition that we bring to the Australian public. These observations are consistent with the recommendation of the 30 APS review and Pat's earlier comments. We need high quality research and analysis to underpin evidence-based policy and delivery, and we need to build that research capability in the APS. And while there are specialist agencies like mine, whose primary role is microeconomic research, ideally we would have this research and evaluation capability more dispersed through the APS in all agencies. And importantly, I think the APS should be engaging the non-government research community in universities, in NGOs, in a way that's open, respectful, builds trust and confidence, to also build the evidence base for better service delivery. And I particularly welcome the specialist data stream that the APSC has established to build that research and analytical capability.
Thanks. Ali, one for you. You have experience in implementing an online learning portal for Defence. What advice do you have for APS employees that might be a little nervous about trying online learning?
Thanks for your question, and I'd like to acknowledge the Bunurong people, the traditional owners of the land in Victoria, on which I come to you from, and acknowledge the way they protected land and waters since time immemorial. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that sincere respect to any First Nations people joining us today. Great question. Online learning. I think the thing I'd say about online learning is that this isn't a binary thing between online learning and face-to-face learning. It's not a binary question. People learn in different ways. Different learning experiences are good for different things, but there are some good things about online learning. So I can only really talk to you about what that looks like for me, because I'd like to acknowledge it really is different for every person. So for me, online learning has its advantages when I need to learn a quick and practical skill. So in lockdown, my tap started spurting everywhere. I have no idea how to fix a tap. So I quickly Googled and watched a YouTube video on how to unscrew your tap, use plumber's tape, which I was lucky enough to have in the house, and screw it back on and fix the tap. So online learning is really good for those fast practical skills. I don't need to go and do a course in fixing a tap now. In fact, I could probably teach someone else. Or a work-based example might be doing something in Excel. So it's just a quick, practical way to acquire a skill. The second thing about online learning and its advantages is that it's really democratic. So I can have an amazing speaker like the Deputy Commissioner here, Pat Hetherington, or Maiku, Jackie Curtis, or even a world-leading expert can come in and talk to a group of people in my branch or organisation, everyone from myself to APS 3s or APS 2s or APS 1s are getting access to exactly the same information at the same time from a really, really great speaker. It's shorter, can be shorter than travelling somewhere, learning face-to-face. You can do an hour-long masterclass or a TED Talk and quickly acquire complex skills or ideas. And the last one, and one that will be really important, we are going to have significant budget pressures. No one's unaware of the debt that the country's taken on for really good reason in the current crises. It can be really practical and economical to do mandatory training. Every person in the APS sort of doing that face-to-face, that's just not practical or economical or a good use of taxpayers' money. Or another kind of wide-scale course that you want to reach a lot of people, it's a really economical way to do it, online training. On the other hand, and again, I can only talk for myself, there are things when online training just doesn't work for me. And I think that's the conversation we have to get better at. So I'm someone who's quite easily distracted. Lucky that was such a great talk from Pat today because I could concentrate for the whole time, but I acknowledge that my learning style needs to be far more engaged than sometimes online provides. Also, I have a personal issue. I have a bit of a head tremor that accompanies a neurological condition that I have. So if I'm sitting at a screen all day, every day, that just won't work for me to do. So if it's something like leadership training or a longer course that you have to sit all day, every day there for a number of days, for me, it's much better and richer, and I'll learn a lot more for that to be face-to-face. So I think that's the conversation we need to get better at. What's practical and efficient, and what's the right delivery method for the right person at the right time? And I would also kind of say in that, we won't always get what we want. Sometimes it will just be, you need to do this learning this way, and that's better than not having any capability learning at all. So I am excited about the opportunities that digital learning can give, but I do want to also acknowledge that we all learn in different ways, and there are times when taking one route or another, when that just doesn't suit you, isn't appropriate either. So thanks for your question.
Thanks, Ali. That was really fulsome. So my final question before handing over to the audience is for you, Pat. As one of the leaders of the APS Mobility Framework Task Force, can you talk more about how staff and teams can use mobility as a way to develop individuals and teams for the future?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lucy. It wasn't until you read out my intro that I sort of decided what I would talk about in relation to this question. I thought I might go with a bit of a personal example in terms of, you know, the roles that I played throughout COVID over the last couple of years. Everyone's got a COVID story, but I'll share my COVID story. So right back at the beginning, when we were first observing COVID outbreaks in China, we started talking about, in the Chief Operating Officer Committee, which is a whole of government committee that incorporates all of the chief operating officers across the federal government. We started talking about how would we kind of maintain critical functions of government in the context of the pandemic. And everyone does their business continuity tests, etc., and, you know, have their plans in place at an agency level. But we were thinking about, you know, what are those kind of core critical functions that we would keep operating. And I was volunteered, I wasn't a member of the COO committee at the time, I was volunteered to lead a Band 2 whole of government task force in determining what those critical functions of government were and in what priority order we would keep them running. And very quickly brought together a group of about 20 Band 2s from across the service, from lots of different agencies, very much trying to bring in different perspectives, different expertise. You know, we had Treasury folks, we had Defence folks, we had people from Home Affairs, we had service delivery folks out of Service Australia, DSS, etc. And what we're trying to do is really understand what are those priorities and you know, how do you keep them running? What does it take to keep the business of government running, including having a sitting government that can make decisions and legislate? Really, really great time for me. First of all, I met a whole bunch of new people that I previously hadn't encountered across the system, and it's always worthwhile investing in your networks across the system. I learnt an enormous amount about different parts of government that previously I'd never had any interaction with. And these are all things that I own. They're capabilities that I now have. They're an understanding that I have developed about the way in which our government operates, simply by being a part of that task force and being brought together to solve a complex problem. I suppose the second part for me is I remember getting a call on a Thursday afternoon saying, "Oh, can you come for a meeting down in Services Australia?" And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll come for a meeting. I rolled down to Services Australia, was handed some keys and a phone and a laptop and said, "Hey, we need you to help mobilise the public service workforce into Services Australia to start processing job seeker payments." And at the time, the numbers were enormous. We were seeing lots of people putting their hand up for job seeker simply to make sure that they could keep a roof over their heads and feed families. This is Australia at its biggest time of need. And so we set about the task, a small team kind of leveraging the different parts of Service Australia and the different parts of our government, of pulling together some 2,000 people that we surged into Services Australia to deliver on what was a pretty core function at the time. Enormously rewarding, like an enormously rewarding piece of work. But again, I learnt an awful lot about the service delivery space of the Australian government. I built connections throughout Services Australia in the social policy space that previously I didn't have. New ways of doing things, new ways of working that I now take with me to the jobs that I do, and I can employ those skills. So that's my kind of personal experience. But I would say to all of you that the opportunity to work in a task force or to participate in a surge can be hugely personally and professionally rewarding. You never know what skills you're going to pick up. You never know who you're going to meet and the connections that you're going to make. So, take those opportunities when they arise. Really do put your hand up and take the opportunity to, work in a oneAPS way. Thanks, Lucy.
Lovely pitch. Couldn't agree more. Mary, I have a question for you from the audience. Do you think in the future there will be an increase in APS staff working from remote and regional Victoria?
Yes, I do think that. And at the Productivity Commission, we're looking at working from home and remote work as an employer, but also as a research organisation. And we put out a research report on this last year, and it showed that, working from home has actually been a really big benefit to society. The ability for workers to avoid a commute, which is costly in terms of time and dollars, but also have greater flexibility to combine work with their other responsibilities. And so it's in everyone's interest to make it work. And we think employers and workers will negotiate in ways that will probably be a hybrid of working in the office and working in the home. And it will be a situation where people are as least, if not more, productive in that way of working. Obviously, that enables people to live and work elsewhere, so you don't have to, just work from your home. You could move to regional Victoria. Because most companies will remain hybrid, I think that will still tether people to CBDs. But, we could see more hubs. I don't see why every agency needs to have its own leasing arrangements in place. Like there could be an APS hub in Bendigo or in Sale, and various staff could go and work there on their office days. So I do think there are opportunities for us to employ more people living in rural and regional Victoria over time, enabled by flexible work and better technology.
Thanks, Mary.
Lucy, can I dive in on that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so first of all, the Productivity Commission's report on this is actually really interesting. Somebody made the mistake of giving it to me late one evening, and then the kind of nerdy accountant part of me sought to understand all the maths in it and spent several hours going through the report. Really good read if you get the opportunity. So I think the answer is almost certainly yes. There will be more opportunities for people to work remotely and in locations that perhaps previously we wouldn't have considered. I said in my remarks, one of the things that the data suggests is continued effort to try and recruit exclusively in places like Canberra is not going to work for us into the future, and I think we do need to embrace this kind of concept of hybrid working if we're going to remain that employer of choice. On hubs, if you've had the opportunity to read the most recent budget papers, you'll see that actually there is a budget proposal in there about establishing APS hubs to do the things that Mary's just described. We haven't yet determined the locations of those hubs, but we are very much looking into how do we establish hubs in regional locations where we can bring people together from multi-agencies, save on leasing costs, etc. But that's one part of it, the efficiency and the effectiveness of it, but also to kind of generate some different ways of thinking and doing work, right? So you're bringing different people together in one location. They're going to bounce off each other. They're going to talk to each other. They're going to say, hey, why do you do that thing the way you do it? And they're going to learn from each other. So I think there's lots of opportunity in that space going forward. I'll probably leave it there, Lucy.
Thanks, Pat. Ali, I might direct this next question to you. Most collaboration between agencies and departments seems to happen at the SES level. How can we encourage greater APS collaboration across all staff levels?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think there's a lot of merit in that question. I tend to agree. I think it is up to the SES to create those opportunities for people. So something I do, look, I come from a service delivery environment, so I'm going to be really conscious of speaking to everyone here. When you're in that fast-paced service delivery environment of work direct with customers, you don't have as many opportunities to engage across the APS. So I do want to be conscious with my answer that I'm very aware of that. So I think in those cases, which is the majority of our people, it's really important that we bring in different people to come and talk to our teams, and so that they get access to that perspective and they can share that information back and forth. So I think it's really important we make opportunities to hear from different people and work types across the APS. I think it's really important that as SES that we support mobility and secondment as much as we can, so people have the opportunity to go off and do different things. My EA is currently doing the surge work in Services Australia, and I need to make that opportunity. I have people on secondment to the APSC, and I think instead of thinking, I just don't have capacity, I have more important work to do in my agency and my patch, we have to think more about the individual people, them developing their skills, and we have to think in the priority of oneAPS, what's important according to oneAPS. And then there's the more informal things. I've gathered some networks across my time in Services Australia and Defence, and if I'm working on something with my team that I know is being done elsewhere or at the APSC, I'll give them a name and really ask them to go and work with that person at the APS 6, EL1, EL2, it doesn't matter the level, that person who has the expertise in that other agency, and come back and report to me what they can learn from that. So I think we have to encourage both the formal and the informal experiences, and truly and genuinely make time and give people a go to do that. I think we come unstuck when we start thinking that our priority in our agency is higher than the oneAPS priorities.
Okay. Anything from the other panel members on that one?
Yeah, sure, Lucy. I'll have a stab at that as well. No, I think the points that Ali's raised are right. I mean, there are so many opportunities for surge at the moment, and so where you've got people in service delivery spaces that don't necessarily get that opportunity to get out into government, surge is a great way to bring people to them and let them give them the opportunity to interact with people from right across the federal government space, and indeed actually state and territory governments as well. So I think we need to continue to lean into that and leverage that opportunity. One of the things that we've been trying to do in the graduate space, for example, is establish in some sort of industrialised way rotations of graduates through different agencies. So picking a graduate cohort, and maybe you spend one of your rotations in a service delivery agency, for example. We haven't yet cracked that. We're still working through that. A lot of it's been overtaken by the need for surge, and lots of our graduates have participated in surge activities. In time, though, you could see graduates into service delivery organisations doing rotations into, say, a policy agency as well. And I think we will then start to generate more of a oneAPS approach to it, and certainly an opportunity for people to build their networks across government that traditionally they may not have had.
I'll just briefly add, there was some interesting research done by some colleagues in central agencies on APS employment and progression, showing that people from diverse backgrounds have some barriers progressing to SES levels. And, part of that is who you know and your networks. So I think SES leaders need to deliberately try to create networking opportunities for the APS staff, especially for those from diverse backgrounds. That could be through, say, reverse mentoring programs, or a cold network, or a professional network. So we have a government economist network. We get together every year and have a conference. So I think we have to explicitly create those networking opportunities for our APS and EL staff.
Thanks, Mary. While you've got the floor, I might direct the next question to you, which I think is probably going to be a question that affects a lot of us. Work intensity, fatigue, and burnout are increasing issues across workplaces. Any thoughts about the management of these challenges while balancing the expectations of government and the public?
So that is something we experienced very explicitly here in Melbourne over the past 2 years, and it was a pandemic of two halves as I see it. There was 2020, which had a very strong, we're all in this together vibe. People were very keen to work on COVID-related effort, to be seen to be contributing to supporting the Australian public. And then come 2021, sort of doing lockdowns again, fatigue really set in, and long lockdowns, the challenges of juggling homeschooling while working from home, and all that. So we really had to support our staff through flexible working and trust, enabling people to, work at 7 a.m. or a little bit later, but having the afternoon or the middle of the day for free to spend with their kids. Genuinely having to reset expectations on work that was not a priority to enable space for work that was, or enable staff to join the APS Surge Reserve. We increased our mental health support to staff through, EAP, other mental health providers like CARPI, seminars on managing wellbeing, resilience, and just openly talking about it, even amongst the SES, about issues like brain fog and being honest and vulnerable that today I'm just not 100%. So I think we're genuinely have to acknowledge what people are capable of and respect their boundaries and reprioritise.
Thanks. Ali, anything to add?
Yeah, this is one I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm smiling because Pat and I had to figure this one out together a little bit. Pat was my boss during the first and maybe even some of the second lockdowns. And we looked at some really, and we were kind of doing flexible work arrangements in defence within Pat's people and culture team well before COVID. We were talking about things. I was in a Canberra-based position, but allowed to live in Melbourne, and Pat was very open to that, and we really had some good guidelines around working where you need to be, not where you're traditionally expected. And there were things we did, like I would send Pat an emoji of a woman going for a run at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just to say, I need to get out and go for a run now. And again, I know in some service delivery environments things can be more difficult, but I do know we can do better to make sure there's flexibility. So I think the point is that the work demands probably aren't going to change. Anybody sitting here thinking, I can't wait till we're over this and everything goes back to normal. I don't want to let you down and say that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to be continually challenged and we'll always be asked to do more. That's just a fact. However, the way we work can change. And we're doing some pilots in my team at the ATO, and we're looking at them across the entire ATO on things like reducing email traffic, meeting-free windows, quiet time and deep work periods, switch off times, flex, it's okay, campaigns around it's okay to go for a run and go to the gym in the day as long as you're doing your whatever hours it is that you are required to work, internal wellbeing challenges. So really shifting the culture about the way we work. We won't change the scale or the amount, but we can change some of our not helpful practices around the amount of meetings we have, the amount of time they run for, the amount of emails we send out, the time the emails are sent to us. We can do way better in those things, and it would really change the work experience for everyone, even those people who are in more tightly scheduled environments.
Thanks so much, Ali. Pat, one of the questions that's just come through that I've noted might be one for you. When discussing the future of working at the APS, when will it be acknowledged that some people are more happy and productive working from home?
Look, I think it already is being acknowledged that some people are more happy and productive working from home. But there's always a balance to be had, right? So we know. So we've always had flexible working arrangements, right? This is not new for the public service. This is not something that we just invented through COVID. We probably led the way on this front for a long while, well before private industry in some respects. We understand the value of it. We understand what it means for our employee value proposition and our capacity to attract and retain the right skills. But there's always a balance to be had. And so first and foremost, we do need to think about what are the organisational outcomes that we have to achieve. We're here to serve the government. We're here to serve the Australian people. This is not, you can decide one day that you don't want to do that. Actually, that's our job. We have to make sure that we are delivering on what our organisations need to deliver in support of Australians. Not all of those things can be done in an entirely flexible way, right? So if you work in one of the intelligence agencies, very difficult to set up a secure space in everybody's houses, right? The way we're going to continue to generate a top secret environment is probably through office-based work, right? So it's got to be fit for purpose. It's got to make sure that whatever work arrangement you strike is governed well, is well understood, but ultimately ends up delivering on the things that we need to deliver on. So I think people do acknowledge that there are, certainly the work that the Productivity Commission has done, that there are productivity gains to be had through hybrid working. It's just making sure that you've got that right. And there is no one-size-fits-all across our public service. As I said in my opening remarks, we are 100 plus agencies across 14 portfolios in nearly 600 different locations around Australia and the world. And flexible working will look different. Will look different across agencies. Will look different within agencies. Some parts of a workplace are highly operational. Others are service delivery. They're face-to-face with customers. And so I think it's about striking the right balance, dependent upon the outcomes that we're trying to achieve within the very vast array of things that we do as a public service. But happy employees are good employees, and it's about trying to strike that right balance.
Thanks, Pat. I might just throw one more at you, which is probably a contentious one, possibly to finish on, depending on how quickly we get through it. Is there any intention to create APS enterprise agreements to bring parity in things such as wages and conditions within the APS?
Hey, look, it's a really great question, and the easy answer for me is to say, well, whole of APS enterprise agreements would be a matter of government policy, and that is not the policy of this government. Hasn't been the policy of successive governments, and so we haven't sort of done the work on that to understand what the benefits or risks might be associated with moving towards a one enterprise agreement. But it's certainly something that that from time to time we do think about. But also, I think the system that we have in play has actually served us pretty well. And for those that think that mobility across our system, that our current enterprise agreement structure and the different enterprise agreements we have across agencies is a barrier, in practice, my experience is it's not. We've worked pretty well at bringing in the right capability into the service. We've worked pretty well at moving that skill set and capability that we need across the service. And enterprise agreements haven't necessarily been a barrier to that. But it is an area that in the future probably some analysis is warranted on.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So that brings our panel discussion to a close, and I'd like to give my sincere thanks to all of our speakers, to Pat, Mary and Ali, for sharing their experiences and answering some tricky questions today. I'd also like to thank you all for watching and contributing to the Victorian edition of the State of the Service Roadshow. While we've not been able to answer all the questions, and there's some excellent ones in there, we will be sharing the questions with the APSC executive and also the panel members. As I mentioned at the start of the session, a recording has been made and will be made available on the APSC website of this event. Thank you all so much and have a great day.